Hi there, Elise Dewsberry here from New Musicals Inc. with another one of my vlogs in the series, How to Get No Feedback from Elise. And today I want to talk about bland main characters. I think this is something that happens all too often to many writers. You can create all kinds of really fun secondary comic characters or, evil villains that are just awesome. But often the main character will wind up seeming bland in comparison to the other characters around them. This is a very common phenomenon, and I think that one of the reasons that this happens is because in an effort to create a character that you want your audience to like, sometimes what you wind up doing is creating a character who is dull and boring and bland because you're afraid to make them too quirky, too weird, too mean, too flawed, because you're afraid that then your audience won't like them if they're flawed. And so your audience winds up liking all of the other characters, but finding your main character to be a bit bland, maybe a bit passive. And so I think the thing to consider for your lead character is that in order for me to really want to go on a journey with your lead character, and to feel compelled that your lead character needs this journey and that something is going to change for the lead character on this journey, you have to be willing to take your character sometimes to some dark places. Your character has to be flawed. They have to have problems in order to be able to need to solve their problems. And sometimes that's very tough to do, to take your lead character to a dark place because you're worried that your audience will not want to come back from there with you. So I think the fine line to tread is how can you take your character into some deeper, darker moments so that and show their flaws and yet leave enough room for redemption that your audience will be able to believe that and go along with you when your character figures out what they've been doing wrong, rights their wrongs, fixes the things they've done wrong, examines their flaws and changes their characters. So it's finding that fine line between the flaw and the ability to be redeemed for that flaw. But you mustn't shy away from having your main character be flawed and have some things that need to work their way to redemption, because if you don't, then your main character might just be bland and boring. The passivity is another question. A character who's passive and isn't active in their own outcome, that can also lead to a bland character. It's a slightly different issue. You want to be careful that your character isn't acted upon, isn't a victim that things happen to, that they need to respond to. And that can happen. Certainly, and there can be an inciting incident that causes a problem for your lead character that they need to solve. But then you need to try to find a way for your character to be active and to participate in their own fate, and not to just have things happen to them or someone else solve the problem for them. They need to, along their journey and as part of their growth, they need somehow to be able to be a participant, maybe not the sole participant. They need to be a participant in their own fate at the end of the day. Otherwise, they become passive, and that also leads to the potential for a character who's bland. The one exception to that kind of idea about a character who needs to be flawed in order to make them interesting and give them a journey to go on. Sometimes you're going to be telling a story about a character who's already upstanding and wonderful and fabulous, and what's happening around them puts obstacles in their way so that they can't achieve what they want to achieve. They're already trying to achieve the right thing. They already have all the right ideals in line, but something is stopping them. A villain or some outside force is not allowing them to achieve their goal. And you can certainly write a story like that in which your character is already a shining example of humanity, and they just have so many obstacles that they need to overcome them, and that isn't necessarily a bad thing. I'm not sure that that's always the most interesting story for us to follow. I think even in that case, even if your character basically is already a pretty good example of humanity, some flaws would still be useful. It's still useful for there to be some flaw in their character that's contributing to the obstacles or making it harder for them to overcome the obstacles, something that they need to learn in order to overcome the obstacles that are stopping them from achieving their goals. And I think in general, you're going to find your lead characters are much more interesting that way, but it takes a little bravery. You need to be willing to risk having your audience not like your lead character in order to have your audience really care about your lead character and feel like they've learned something and they've progressed somewhere. So if you sit on the fence and try to keep them likable, you might wind up having them just be plain old bland. So that's what I'm recommending today. Make sure that you're willing to push the boundaries a bit with your lead character, and risk the possibility that at least at some point during the show, your audience might not like them, but leave open the door for redemption so that we can find our way back. And I think that's going to give you the most interesting and powerful journey for your lead character. So that's been a little discussion about bland lead characters. That's it for this time, and we'll see you next time. Toodaloo.